everything else wherever the people have joined from. And thank you very much for joining us for this webinar on mineral auctions. How fair is the game and for whom? I had a question from someone that why do I include the name game? I thought that it comes from the game theory, and auctions belong to that arena. So I retained it as the game, the famous game theory that goes behind the mineral auctions, which we are not talking about, and for whom indicates multiple things here. It can be the government, it can be the mining companies. Within mining companies can be captive miners, merchant miners, public versus private. So even I don't know, because we are in the process of learning. At CSEP, we have started a work program on non-fuel mineral economics, techno-economics, in fact, because we do have the gas studies going on, coal studies going on. So I thought this is a good opportunity to be on discussing the issues of auctions, which is really important. I am also thankful to our panelists, Mr. Arun Kumar, Shri Ashok Bal, Shri Chanakya Chaudhary, and Dr. Nick Senapati, who has kindly agreed to join, even though I approached to him very recently. Thank you very much. In fact, as I said, Dr. Rakesh Mohan wanted to join, but for reasons that he's a bit unwell, he's not able to. And the issue of auctions that we will discuss, I'll have an initial presentation for about 5 minutes or 7 minutes. But before that, I would like to introduce the distinguished panel that we are having on the screen. Thank you, Mr. Arun Kumar. Mr. Arun Kumar is from the Indian Administrative Service. He was the Secretary to Ministry of Mines during 2017-18. And he oversaw amendments to the mining auction rules in 2018. He was the chairman of the Sand Mining Committee, which released the Sand Mining Framework in 2018. He has also been on the board of NALCO, Hindustan Copper Limited, and MECL, Mineral Exploration Company Limited. So his origin is from IIT Delhi, but he is also a postgraduate in economics. So a good combination of engineering and economics. Welcome, Shri Kumar. Shri Ashok Bal is our second panelist, and he's the CEO of India Mining Operations of SL Mining and Industries, Aditya Birla Group. He's a distinguished alumnus of the Delhi School of Economics and Management Development Institute, MDI Gurgaon, with 27 years of experience in Indian Revenue Service, where he was Commissioner of Income Tax in various states and was in the Enforcement Directorate in Mumbai, Chairman of Mumbai Port Trust and Corporate Affairs, now with SL Mining. So we would hear something interesting from him. Welcome, Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary, and we have spoken earlier with you. Thank you very much. And I remember you from our meetings at NCAER way back in 2015. Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary is the Vice President, Corporate Services, Tata Steel. He handles the functions of corporate administration, communications, CSR, security, aviation, sports and medical services, and has worked with Tata since 1988. He is the co-chair of FICCI Mining Subcommittee and FICCI National Sports Committee. He serves as a member of National Committee of Mining of CII, the Jharkhand State CII Council, Eastern Regional CII, and is associated with Managing Committee of FIMI, Federation of Indian Mineral Industries. Also welcoming Dr. Nick Senapati. Thank you very much for joining us. He is the president at Australia and India Business Council Limited. He was the president until 2015. He was the country head and managing director of Rio Tinto in India. a role that he held almost for 10 years. Nick is a geologist and has spent over 35 years in the mining industry with roles in exploration, operations, strategy, and external relations. A very warm welcome for joining, even though I understand it's quite late by Australia time. So, sincere thanks to you, Nick, for joining us. And with this bit of introductions, if I have missed something, please, my apologies. But I tried including the salient points from various sources that we could gather. Now, I think what I'll do, you see, because all four of you and some of us are familiar with the issue of auctions, many of our distinguished participants might not be. So I probably will run through a very brief 5 slide or 6 slide show where some of the participants would understand what the mineral auctions is, because this is somehow not become a very fleshy topic. Like when I discuss international trade, I think I immediately get so many, but we still have 40 today, which I was probably not expecting. But and we have very senior people who have joined in the once the Q&A comes, we would hear them. So if I can probably go to a brief presentation, which is actually not going to say a lot, but I would. I hope my screen is showing up.
Yeah, it's showing up fine, Rajesh Chadha. You can just go to full screen and it should be fine.
Yeah. View full screen. Hope it is fine now. So we could not. Sorry, this was announced earlier, Nick. We could not include you at the moment, but you are very much on the panel, and this is what we are discussing today. For our audience benefit, I think I will walk through just 4 major phases that we thought of. That non-fuel mining in India was a heavily regulated sector with public sector units dominating till 1993. Some reform, sector liberalized, National Mineral Policy 1993, and there were amendments to Mines and Mineral Development and Regulation Act. And private and foreign investments were encouraged. However, 2010 to 15, there was a fallout of the coal scam, and even this sector comes to a standstill with very few new leases granted, and many of the international companies leave. 2015 to 21 is the new auctions regime, which is the discussion for the day, based on the Supreme Court directive of being fair, objective, and transparent allocation system. And there are some further amendments in 2021. However, we'll stick to the auctions issue. For the audience benefit, there are 2 important characteristics of auctions. One is the format, that is how auctions are designed. I won't go into details. And the second is information, that is information regarding the common value, which is nearly the same for everyone who is bidding, and private value, where a bidder has his or her own evaluation of a particular block or mine. In mineral auctions in India are 2-stage electronic English auction, which obviously we are not discussing today the theory behind it, but something interesting for those who are not aware, there is a concept that is called average sale price, which is the average of the mineral grade in a state, weighted average of X mine prices of non-captive mines, which means the merchant mines, most of them. The value of the resources at the time of bidding is estimated using the quantity and the average sale price. Auction payments to be made monthly to the state government, minerals dispatched in a month multiplied by ASP, average sales price, and the auction percentage quoted. So whatever percentage is quoted of the auction. royalty payment to the state government is either ad valorem or tonnage base. On top of the payments for auction bids, a DMF, which is called District Mineral Foundation Fund, needs to be paid, which is 10% of the royalty payment of the auction mines and 30% of the royalty payments of the existing mines, which means which have not been auctioned, have been there. On top of that, National Mineral Exploration Trust fee of 2%. So you can see that there are multiple charges that come even above the auction payment. Now, this is a table that we have taken from the Ministry of Mines website, where we see that about 103 auctions have taken place since 2015-16 when the act was amended. And the estimated, so if you see the estimated value of the auctioned resource is given here as in rupees crore, 804,098 rupees crore. And so let's say this is 100%. The expected auction revenue that has been published by the ministry is 693,371, which is 86% of the estimate of the value of the auction resource. And on top of that, if we put royalty plus DMF plus NMET, comes to another 17%. And it's an interesting economics to which we are trying to understand, dear panelists, and because you have such wealth of experience, that estimate for the revenue to the government for 50 years is somewhere here, and 103%, which means the revenue left for the mining companies, if in a nuanced way, 23,455 crores, which is minus 3% of the value of the estimated resource. And one interesting thing that we observed in the iron ore auctions, the auctions have gone, only 5 greenfield have been auctioned, and they are at the auction bid of 70%, and 31 brownfield have been auctioned at a bid of 107%, mind-boggling. This is much above the 104 also. So Odisha, I've given the numbers also, but we will be circulating a paper after the discussion today. Limestone auctions have been surprisingly low average at 46% weighted average. However, if you see here, the greenfield have been much more than the brownfields, and only 3 brownfields. And brownfields have quoted lower premia than the greenfields. I think I'm not going to go into details and stop here, and would rather go to the discussion than to, I need to probably close it. Okay. So I think I'm back with you, and can we have some discussion now, because I don't want to take more airtime when such specialists are with us. So I thought I can divide the discussion into maybe 3 rounds, so that all of you get an opportunity to educate the audience as well as us. One is the overall that I have presented. The second one is the iron ore auctions. The third one is the issues of discrepancy between brownfield versus greenfield. And then finally, anything about if we had done exploration better since 2010, could there have been more auctions? We don't know, but your views would be very important. And some education to us about the Bandar diamond mine would be very much in place. So can I move with my first discussion point is that what I presented, that we understand that auctions is transparent, fair, and objective way of allocating natural resources. However, what we need to have a little more discussion is on 86% average bid and 17% statutory payments, 103% of the resource value of the resource being promised in return. On top of that, there would be probably corporate taxes, forest and wildlife protection payments, stamp duties, etc. So I thought it will be a good group to let us know how do we proceed. And we don't have Mr. Arun Kumar with us.
I think he's just dropped out. I'll try to check with him to see what's happened.
Please. And I think he's there.
He's back now, yes.
Yeah. Mr. Kumar, are you there? Mr. Arun Kumar? Okay, I think while he connects, can we start the discussion with Ashokji, Mr. Bal, if you would have some observations on what we have, what I just laid out.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Thank you very much for the introduction and for the discussion we are having today. See, in fact, the table which you presented, where the government statistics shows that 100% we have the government has bidded for 100%. They are getting 103%, and 3% is the loss to, that is the net earning is minus 3%. This table, in fact, tells the entire story. In fact, with these opening remarks, you see, I'd like to say, a couple of things, because I'll restrict my discussion to the iron ore mining auction in Orissa, because Orissa accounts for the substantial portion of the mining iron ore reserves in the country, and it is a state that is very, very vital and very important for the iron ore, space. In fact, if you see, the learnings from the last auction, I feel there are 4 learnings. To my understanding, there are 4 learnings. First, is the exorbitant, unusual, and irrational bids. The lowest bid in Orissa was 90.9% and highest was 154%. And this is only the revenue sharing. In addition to the revenue sharing, there are other components of costs like royalty, DMF, NMET, etc. And that is besides your cost of production. In my first learning or observation is that this irrationality defies logic. Second, the mining space has become absolutely distorted and skewed. In a pre-auction scenario, if you see, the mines which are offered for auction, they are all 100% merchant. In the post-auction, we have a very transformative shift. We have got a transformative shift in as much as the entire space is dominated by the end user, either the captive fellows or those who are having the manufacturing facilities. If I give you statistics, out of the minerals, mineral reserves which are auctioned for 6, to these about 24 minus about 6 miners, 5, about 19 miners, out of 1623 million metric tons, 1,450 were occupied by captive players or those having end user facility. That means they account for about 85% of the reserve and balance to the merchant miners. The classification is the culprit. I always say this classification is the culprit. In my article in Business Lines, I've also re-emphasized in 2 of my consecutive articles. I've said the classification is the culprit. Why? Because, when the mines were classified as captive and open category, captive mines were exclusively reserved for the captive fellows, whereas the balance, it was open to both captive and the merchant, both end user and the merchant. So that actually laid the foundation of a distorted market structure. Time permitting, we can discuss, but then this is the second, learning as far as the mineral auction of iron ore is concerned. And third, you see, the 24 mines were put for auction. What has happened? The 5 merchant mines were surrendered. Out of 19, 6 miners have not been able to commence their production as yet. The 10 have started production, but they are producing less than 1/3 of their EC capacity. So all of them have violated the tender condition where it is stipulated under the head MDPA. That means they are supposed to do 80% of their average previous 2 years production, because the government was very keen that it should not lead to a disruptive scenario. So it has led to a situation where they have not been able to meet their MDPA. The consequences is a different thing. They are a different thing, but then I'm saying that what is the outcome of this? And fourth is a very, very important issue, because mining as a standalone industry has probably been given a go by. You know, this is something which is inconsistent with the global practice. So this is, as far as these are the 4 lessons, I think we can discuss, because the way forward is very important. And this way forward in the context of the recent Mineral Amendment Rules and Act, that is very important. So we can, we can throw open to the, entire group for discussion. But for the time being, I'll stop here. Then on the way forward, I'll come back again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pal. And I think I was inviting Mr. Arun Kumar for his comments on what I had presented as such large bids where on an average, this is a weighted average, the expectation is 103% to be paid back to the government in 50 years. And I think you have raised some interesting points regarding the mine development, MDPA, and also I think one more question that I may add to, or observation that I may add to it, that it's surprising that in iron ore, I think the merchant miners have been very small actually, so they have quoted much, their figure is much higher than captive miners, and it is reverse for the limestone. We'll come to that later. So, can I give it to Mr. Arun Kumar, who has joined us, and enlighten us on this complex thing that we are discussing? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's not really enlightenment, just information, because people who are in the sector are very much aware of what is happening. Now, of course, we were talking about limestone and iron ore and the differences thereof. So limestone is a particular commodity which is very easily explorable. It's tied to a plant. So it is available in a largely stripped sort of a formation. So obviously it has different characteristics as compared to iron ore. Now the main issue here, this point which Mr. Paul said about captive and non-captive, that was certainly an issue, but in the recent amendment in 2021, that has more or less been given up. But still, it is relevant that we look in the past as to how things have happened on the captive and non-captive space. Now, why the bids are so high? The bids have been so high because going forward, the trade does not see a surplus of iron ore. It's as simple as that. And if you look at iron ore as a percentage, the cost percentage vis-a-vis the final product of raw steel, the value is around maybe somewhere between 10 to 15%, depending on the efficiency of the plant. So people have, bid high for a scarcity value. And in any case, if see a captive, I'm again using the word captive for the purpose of a particular genre. If a captive miner has to buy iron ore from the open mines, then they are in any case say, paying a price X. Whereas if they bid slightly more, then they are paying a price of X plus 10%. But the 10% gives them a assurance of supply, as well as assurance of, as I was saying, supply means disruption at a very little cost, and very little cost vis-a-vis the final product. So that has been the sense of why iron ore production have been, or prices have been very high. It's not good for the sector, and sector because ultimately, as and when maybe 20 years, 30 years later, we have better regimes, the prices will fall, and these mines which are presently being taken by the captive owners would tend to be given up or subject to penalties and litigation. But anyway, 20 to 30 years is a very long time, and one does not know whether things will reform themselves or deteriorate, so on and so forth. Now, what is the impact of all this? The impact would be obviously the production would not keep up, and slowly with the rise and requirement of steel, we would become a net importing country. So my response has been, I think, very varied and all over the place. I think we can look at others who are really from the market. I am talking from a macro and the government point of view, so to say, or what the government used to feel, but people in the field who are bidding would perhaps be the right people to home truth whatever I am saying.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar. I think it was not all over the place, but it was discussing the issues that we wanted to put in perspective, and that you have done it quite nicely and in a very comprehensive manner. However, I think two observations here for rest of the discussion is that what I hear you say is that why should we be complaining? This is the miner's choice to bid high. Why should we be complaining? So that's one, because they want the security of the resource. And also, another thing that needs to be studied carefully through an economics lens is that since their cost is only, share and input is only 10%, you said, so they may not bother. But what can bother some of the economists is that, implicitly what we are saying is that let them use the resource that, because this is a national resource. If I may say that this belongs to everyone, it belongs to you, me, everybody in the country. It's a national resource. So my worry, in case the captive miner chooses to, and you said that it has ended now, captive miner chooses to use it the way it satisfies him, my country's resources, India's resources in mining industry may not be optimally utilized. And in a general equilibrium framework, if I look at he may be a gainer personally, but or she may be a gainer personally, the mining company. It will be at the cost of optimum utilization of productive resources as far as the economy is concerned. And with this observation, that what you said, that the miners have chosen because of their security. And I have given another point of view from an economist that I am also worried about the best optimum utilization of mining resources in the country because this is important for manufacturing. Can I now come to Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary?
So I will, if I may, I'll just
Please.
respond to one or two things.
Yeah.
Because what I was trying to say is, maybe it is, I was not clear on that. I was only explaining the rationale, perhaps.
Yeah. No, I understand.
I was not. In fact, I said that this level of, scarcity and this methodology would take the mineral resource extraction to a low level, and India becomes, instead of an exporter, more and more of an importer. Now we have stuff lying here, so to say, and we become an importer. So I was not just getting into the economic efficiency issues. In fact, I think this will lead to scarcity. And just a small thing on what you are saying about efficiency of a captive miner, that is a very oft, spoken matter that, what happens to the material which is left out. So there were earlier exemptions on disposing those materials, which came in 2015 and 2016 and 2017. And now, as there is no distinction as such, that would going forward not be an issue. So my point was not, I was just trying to see why this is happening. And I feel that the results of whatever has happened till now in an overall scenario will be detrimental to the country's interests.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar. And I had actually taken those thoughts forward when I posed this question to Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary. It's not a question, I think it's an open discussion. And yeah. And thank you very much for clarifying that. Over to you, Mr. Chaudhary.
Good afternoon, Dr. Chadha. Thanks a lot, Mr. Kumar. Good afternoon, and Nick. Good to see you after a long time. I hope Australia is treating you well and vice versa. And Mr. Bal, I don't think we've interacted, but maybe anyway. So thanks a lot. I think let me start from a bit of a backgrounder. I like the way you presented the way things have changed in India over a period of time, and that's an important piece because that's where the devil lies, and we should pick it up. And I know there's a huge debate always in India, and Nick would remember when we were talking about this even 5 to 10 years back, captive versus non-captive, and nothing much changes, we're still talking about it. So I'll try and answer from a captive mining perspective and a non-captive because we are also getting into that now. So if you look at India per se, we were all regulated, licensed. And in 1993, post the 1991 deregulation, there were some changes which were made. And you did refer to them in your opening slides, which said that some of these sectors were brought in for getting into mining. So let me give you the sequence. It was steel, power, and cement. These were the 3 sectors which were brought into mining as well. And the question is why? And the answer is because these are manufacturing sectors. These are sectors which were opening up, and these are the sectors which would need the mineral for getting into their final product. Steel per se was into mining I would say license Raj as well. So if you realize mining, whether it's iron ore, whether it is coal, was into private hands for many, many decades before they were licensed. Now, if I fast forward from there to see what happened between 93 to 2010, because I'm taking the timelines what you have presented. And a lot of movement happened in terms of manufacturing. And a lot of companies came into mining or wanted to come into mining. Interestingly, a lot of comparisons started happening between India, Brazil, and Australia, where mining is concerned. But is that a fair comparison? Now, just speaking about India, we are pretty uniquely poised. We have the natural resources. We have the natural resources where iron ore, coal may not be totally coking coal, but yes, non-coking coal, limestone. You actually name the mineral chrome, we have the highest deposit, manganese. So you name the mineral and it's there. So, and you need manufacturing, whether it is steel, whether it is aluminum, cement, power generation, and so on and so on. For which you need the mineral, which you have. You have the people. You are the second largest populated country, which are skilled, need employment. And by the way, the same population which is so high also turns out to be our customers and consumers. So which other country is so uniquely poised to have the full chain being fed, from the natural resource to the land to the skilling of people, hands to work, and consumers with hands and mouth? Now that's the chain we should look at. And let's bring in the comparisons. Brazil, whenever we talk about mining, we'll say, look at Brazil, look at Australia. But Brazil and Australia have defined themselves as mining countries. Are we supposed to be a mining country? No, that's a decision which the government has to take. That's India's decision. And I don't think the answer is yes, we are a mining country or we should be a mining country because of the reasons I just mentioned. Hence, there was a parallel line drawn for captive and non-captive. There is a parallel line drawn, and you, Dr. Chadha very rightly said, this is a natural resource given by God, given by nature, and it is my resource. So, who should get advantage of that resource? Should it be India and Indians, or should it be outsiders? And outsiders means outside India, not beyond within India. Now, you may say that, are you going to sell your final product cheap compared to any other person? The answer actually lies between yes and no. This is not a straight no, straight yes. However, 2010 to 15, we all saw the coal block scam, this thing, that thing, all chaos all over the place, and finally we decided to get into auctions. Is auction the right method? The answer is again yes or no, because some countries have used and gone back to first come, first serve. Yes, it brings in transparency. It brings in possibly the revenue maximization, which has never been talked about. But yes, it brings in revenue maximization along with transparency. But so does first come, first serve in other countries. We should look at how the other mining countries and other countries which give out auctions and leases, the mining leases, how have they done? Nevertheless, the challenge that, because you said, is it fair to all or to some? So I want to answer that upfront to say that there are few stakeholders which stand. It's the people where the mine is. It's the lessee who comes and mines. It's the final product guy who gets it, or the mineral who someone gets it, and it's the government. Now, the moment you get into revenue generation and revenue maximization, one stakeholder surely gets benefited, which is the government. And for good reasons, it should be plowed back into developmental work. No problems there. But does it give you the competitive advantage for setting up manufacturing in the country where you are saying, I would like to be 25% of GDP in manufacturing? The answer is no, because all the manufacturing companies have to be set up in the rural India. None of this is going to be set up in Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, Chennai. They will all come in rural India because that's where the land is, that's where the mineral is. Some of the companies may start coming closer to the customers, but the environmental laws and regulations will not allow it to come. So there is an issue to be discussed and finalized. I will come to that point of auctions, what have happened in the auction and why their bids are so high. Surely there has been irrational behavior by the bidders, which possibly includes us. I will not say that we win doodh ka dhula, Okay. But the challenge in India is when you move to a new regime, you don't leave back stuff of the old regime. And that's where the first kill of this option is. We were into royalty stage. Then we went into premiums, bids, and then we said there will be a percentage of royalty as DMF, NMET. Royalty continues. The states are still putting pressure on the government of India to say increase royalty every 3 years. Why couldn't we say zero royalty from day one? Revenue is the premium bids will come in, and you will have ABC to happen next to it. We have continued with the past and added a few more in the newer regimes. Which country? I do not know of any country where NMET, where you want to create a corpus, comes from the lessees. I really don't know. I think when you say higher taxations, it's actually double taxation. So that's where one of the pieces needs to be settled fast. That if you have moved into auctions, leave alone the things of the past, add only of the auctions. The bidding, the way it has been happening in the country, and I'm not getting into coal because coal was more as a knee jerk, came from Supreme Court. Suddenly we had to decide to operate those 30 leases or 24 leases, and that's what we did. Somewhere I think the mining auctions have been predominantly thought through from iron ore, not from a mining perspective. It's been basically saying iron ore has played havoc, which is a fact it has during 2001 and 10, where people really exported stuff and did all kinds of wrong things. That has predominantly decided the way we will get into auctions. The point is, why would we not auction 30 mines together or 20 mines together, greenfield, brownfield, whatever we say? Why is it that we pick up 2 mines and say, now we will bid these 2 mines? 4 mines will bid for these 4 mines. The moment the players who have to bid see 20 mines or 30 mines and say, okay, if I don't get this, I will get this, there will be a rationalization which will come in. Second is that what has been already said, that even if it is 10 to 15% of my cost, I could see it as a pass-through because I will add to the final product. Yes, that is one of the thought processes for sure. But and you pay a higher premium for assurance because I can't stop my end-use product, what Mr. Arun Kumar was saying. I tend to agree with that perspective. But your last point, Dr. Chadha, was selective mining. You didn't use the word selective, but you did refer to, if I give it to a captive guy, he will select and pick it up. And I think that's where the latest modifications allow that once you are able to use whatever you have to use for your end use, the balance you can dispose of. What it doesn't tell you is that the beneficiation plants in the mine, because none of the raw material, raw mineral gets used. It's always beneficiated. In the past, even the post-beneficiation, the stocks which were of lower grade, sub-grade were never allowed to be disposed of, though there was some buyer, some user within the country. And that this modification allows. So I think my closing comments, and then we can get into a little more of this discussion is it fair to all the stakeholders? The answer is no. Second is, once we have moved from the old to the new regime, then let's have only rules for the new regime, no carry forward of the old. And by the way, the whole conversation is always about higher taxation, double taxation and stuff, and that needs to be settled. And the third is, let's give it a try. If it's auction, so be it. But let's not do piecemeal work here. Let's do together and say, this is my annual calendar. In this year, we will bid out these mines. Let the lessees look at it or prospective bidders look at it and say, okay, I will bid in this, I will not bid in this, and then pick it up. Because see, if I speak from a steel company perspective, we have a a vision of about 250, I will not say 300, another 5 to 7 years. So I know the capability that I will have. I can't produce 100 million out of 250. I will go from, let's say, 2025 to 30 million, 35 million. Someone will go at, and then I look at it a 50-year cycle. So the mineral now comes for 50-year cycle. I will plan accordingly. Why would I bid for a higher resource which I don't need? I don't want to do that. No one will do it because by the end of it, you pay money. So I think if the whole calendar is made in a way with timelines and people just come and bid for whatever they want, the higher bidding levels will come down. Otherwise, it will not stand the test of time. As it is, we are having enough examples of companies coming and returning the even forfeiting amounts and saying, take it back. So let me stop here and then we can discuss if there are any questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you have widened the scope and canvas by maybe I'll pick up 2 or 3 statements because this is such a rich discussion that it can go on. But I'm just picking 2 or 3 from what you have said so that I can then give it to Mr. Senapati, Dr. Senapati. That India is compared with Australia as far as the geological resources are concerned, and Brazil you said, but I'm talking, let's say, of Australia. One difference that if it can be brought into discussion is the issue of density of population, and that where the resources, mining resources are in India is highly densely populated, and a lot of, in our work, we are also giving equal attention to the issue of normative economics. That is, are the communities being treated well? How the local communities get affected? And I'm sure, I think it is elsewhere in the world also that this discussion is going on. But we would very much, and we have recently completed a paper which I had shared with some of you on sustainable mining jurisdictions or districts of Jharkhand. That is the first work that we have started. I'll share with you. The paper is going to be soon edited and uploaded. So I just wanted to add that normative angle to our thinking. My second pick from what you spoke, Mr. Chaudhary, is important in the sense that, it is very good to have good revenues for the government, and obviously they go for the good of the public. But again, as an counterfactual, economics counterfactual, I have not yet been able to think of that. But suppose the bids were not as high as they are, and the exploration was done much better since 2010, there could have been many more explored mines, and probably with a competitive bidding. I don't know, because I have not yet tested this or done the work on this. With competitive bidding, the levels of bids could have gone down if better exploration had been done. A. B. The second part to it is that if the mining companies are squeezed to 100%, let's say, so I mean not all, because I have already said that limestone is different than, let's say, graphite is different than if we do not leave much with the companies, hypothetically, would they actually be doing good justice to the local communities in multiple other ways that they could have done? So I think I have added 1 or 2 angles to it, maybe population density issue, the normative issue, the local communities issue, and that probably with lower revenue per mine, there could, and better exploration, we could have had 503, we know about 10A, 2B, 2C, etc. So much more on. So over to you, Mr. Senapati, for your views. And then we will take some questions from the audience.
Well, I think having only been in India for a period of time working in the industry. So let me first say hello, Arun and Mr. Bal and Chanakya, good to see you. Um, I think the auction process, as Chanakya said, was designed around bulk minerals, about coal and iron ore and limestone. And the auction process obviously focused on those. The extraordinary high bids, to me from a distance, just does not seem to be sustainable. I just cannot see how you either pass on your cost to the end product, where the population is therefore paying for it in that regard. But I just cannot see it as sustainable, as well as I cannot see any foreign company putting their money into doing that sort of bidding, given that they only have to pay 10% royalty in Australia for iron ore. Total. Varies a little bit, but it's in the order of that 10%. It may be 15% somewhere else, but it's much, much lower. Why would any foreign company come to India to participate in the bidding process? The other aspect is, which I think Arun brought up, in maybe the bidding was because of the scarcity of resource. And my view of scarcity of resource is slightly different, because in 1980, Australia and India had the same iron ore resources. Australia has mined all those resources in numbers, in tonnage, and they still have twice as much as India has today. Because they explored, they looked for more. The incentive to tell people what their resource was increased their share price, and therefore they looked for more ore. While in India, the whole process is about underreporting. Because if you report too much, it gets taken off you, or it gets bidded out to somebody else. So I think the underreporting is an issue in the resource definition, as well as the drilling in India on most of these resources. As far as, I mean, I don't know the latest on this, but it was, 100-meter type drilling on the iron ore deposits. They never went to basement to find out what really was the full resource and reported against that. So there is I think the scarcity of resource is not necessarily the fact in India. The other thing is that in the auction process, if you use iron ore and coal as the bulks to develop your auction process, you cannot then use it for base metal auctions as well. Because and even in iron ore to some degree, but less so, the way resources are found are that they are found in the head of a geologist before they're found in the ground. It's an idea. It's a hypothesis. And if I have a hypothesis that there is something out there, how can you auction my hypothesis? I just don't understand that process. It goes against the whole concept of exploration. So exploration is a scientific process of testing hypotheses. And if you can't then auction that hypothesis, and who is going to give you that hypothesis? Because it's my intellectual property. It's my idea. So I think the auction process doesn't necessarily work for deep-seated minerals unless you fully explored that mineral, it's defined well, it's in a bankable resource, then perhaps you can you can auction it because it's a known quantity. But that means the government has to do all the exploration, and the exploration is a high risk venture. It, 1 in 1,000 exploration projects come up with a deposit. And why would the government waste their taxpayers' money doing that sort of thing when there are many companies, if they were given the rights at the end of it, would be happy to spend that sort of money and take that risk? So that's all I would say. I think auctions to me has. I'm not sure Arun Kumar may say, in 20 years' time, it may be all worked out and it may all come back to a lower level. But I can't see it sustainable at this current level.
Just Nick and Dr. Chadha, just a small response. As I said, my statements were all over the place. I was not talking of resources as they are assessed. I was talking, and to some extent, Chanakya Chaudharyji was also talking, as to the resources available for auction. So it was, I didn't mean the resources available geologically. I meant that the resources which are available for, there's a shortage and scarcity of those, and therefore a scarcity of the material which will emerge. So I was talking in that sense.
So
that was one. And what I said 20, 30 years down the line, I see a further loosening up of the auction system. Because even with the current relaxations in 2021, the scenario of scarcity as available for bidding or which leads directly to production would perhaps continue. So I think when I was saying I was a bit mixed up, I hope this clarifies me. So I'm not that bad a geologist, if you allow me.
Yeah, I know you're not. I know.
Can I supplement my point?
Please.
Hello?
Please.
Yeah. See, the two aspects have been highlighted. See, Mr. Kumar, in his opening remarks, probably, I agree with him, in order to justify the concept of captive, miners. He said, there is a requirement of assurance of resource or security of resource is a reason for, captive, promoting the captive concept. I agree in a sense. He is absolutely right. But then I would like to add that resource assurance, this is just one of the means for, sort of promoting resource assurance. And like in coal, we have the fuel, supply linkage. So therefore, there can be alternate methods of, ensuring resource availability. So this is not the only way of resource availability. And here, let me also tell you, I'm not on the perspective of captive or merchant. I'm now advocating, and I'm talking from a point of view of neutral perspective. That's one. Number two, see, as far as the resource position is concerned, I tend to agree with Nick, because if you see the recent auctions in Orissa, where the 24 mines were auctioned, the working mines were auctioned, the resource position prior to auction and post auction, as far as resource availability is concerned, is not dented. Now the government of Orissa is coming out with further auctions. So with these auctions, and these auctions, they comprise of both greenfield as well as brownfield working mines. So therefore, the resource position is going to increase. And third thing I'd like to say, in the context where a reference has been made to the new amendment, wherein the concept of, the distinction between captive and non-captive has been deleted. But I wonder whether, this is definitely a welcome step, but then whether this is going to address the issue at hand. In this context, let me also tell you, see, today we have a highly fragmented and distorted market structure. You see, who are the players in the, what are the varieties of players on the ground? See, we have the PSU merchant miners like NMDC and OMC. Second, we have got the non-auction captive mines, both in the government sector as well as the private sector. Then we have got auctioned captive mines. And in these auction captive mines, see, they can sell up to 25% without any additional levy. Beyond 25%, up to 50%, they have a levy, additional levy. Then we have got auction merchant mines. And the last category is the continuing merchant mines. And we have about 5 to 6 varieties. And if you see their cost structure, the cost structure is very wide, from as low as, as low as, you say about 20% to as high as 148%. So my point is, and this is after taking into account the additional levy which a captive fellow has to pay in case he, after meeting his requirement, if he sells beyond 50% of the capacity. So the point is, as long as, this kind of a structure exists, so merely the fact that, you have to pay an additional levy does not address, because additional levy does not neutralize the cost structure differences. So therefore, this situation, it may be slightly, more, civil, not the absorbent, rates like 150%. But then I will not be surprised if the same madness continues. And I am of the firm view that this kind of high bids are not sustainable. And secondly, you see, I think you would also refer to to one issue wherein said, why should we be complaining if they are paying 140%, 150%, or 90%? Why should we be complaining? But this is something which is the core issue, because the policy is promoting a culture where we rob the Peter to pay the Paul. Ultimately, who suffers? Ultimately, the consumer suffers. Ultimately, the buyer suffers. So therefore, the public interest is not public revenue alone. And I'm very doubtful. And let me also tell you, the proponents of the government revenue, they say that government revenue increase because it has started showing in Orissa. The projections of Orissa government in the last auctions is proving wrong. So therefore, ultimately, everything is a pass-through, and ultimately the customer suffers. And that is not public policy, that is not public interest.
Thank you very much. And that was a lot of coverage on the issues that have been discussed. I think one issue that came up when Nick, you were speaking, and others who have spoken, is probably the issue of deep-seated minerals. And more so, I think the issue of, when you said, Dr. Senapati, about the intellectual property of a geologist, in the recent past, that COVID times have shown us that, and particularly when we are moving towards a new normal of renewable energy and electric vehicles and energy, solar panels. So what worries this again, this is not an auctions question, but yeah, implicitly, Nick, you made it an auctions question also, that how about exploring the deep-seated minerals? How about the availability of the critical minerals that might get short of if the international scenario is what it is today? So fractured global value chains, not only in other products, but in mining also. So any comments on this? Because what we heard from Dr. Senapati, if Mr. Chaudhary and Mr. Arun Kumar, if you can throw some light on this, would be very, very useful. That these are what we talked about are iron ore and maybe limestone, but what about the rare minerals? What about the deep-seated minerals? Any views on that would be very welcome. And I think one thing that Mr. Bal has clarified just now and talked about, public revenues are important, but not at the cost of efficient working of the economy. Maybe the public revenues could have been double what they are today if we had explored more, if we had auctioned more. I think I'll stop here and give it to Mr. Chaudhary and then to Mr. Kumar.
Yeah, so I think if I pick up the thought of public revenue and public good, absolutely point bang on. There is no denying the fact what you just mentioned, Mr. Bal and Dr. Chadha, that public revenue may not lead to public good. Absolutely fine with that thought. So it really takes me back to, Dr. Chadha, you also talked about the community development and community work. So I think, and I don't want to say only CSR, because CSR, the whole thought process has been of voluntary work. But I would say that as we have progressed over a period of time, it has become more of a social license rather than just a community engagement or community work. And government has also mandated 2%, and for everything that you do in any of the areas, there is an environmental charge, there is a community engagement charge, and DMF has also been brought in the auctions, which is primarily to be utilized in the development of the same district from where the mineral comes out. But it is also kind of connected or led to some kind of confusion, where people earlier used to, when I say people means project proponents, used to earlier engage with the local communities, decide jointly as to what needed to be done, and then carry on with the work that was to be done. Now, there is a DMF. So there are a lot of noises which are now gaining shape and size, where project proponents say that I am paying to the government coffers for the development of the district, and let the district decide to utilize it. So this is also raising some alarm. It may not have reached that stage where one will have to really address it, but at the same time, it has got a structure around it. I hope it gets plowed back in the development of the community and the engagement around it. So I think that's one of the things which I thought I should mention, because you did mention about the community initiatives and stuff like that. The second one, I think you also talked about the population density. You did mention initially about the population density if you compare with India versus the other countries. So I think one point I wanted to mention, but it got missed out, is that Australia also had a thriving steel industry once upon a time. It's not so now. And it's a good case study to look at. One of their good steel companies is BlueScope, which we have a joint venture in India with them. And we get a lot of insight into what used to happen in the steel industry in Australia and why it could not survive for long. And I'm not talking about the company and steel industry per se. They had the right mineral for the steel industry. But they decided to go on as a mining country, because the consumers were not in Australia, they were outside. And logistics costs would have been much higher. So that's one part which one needs to look at. Coming back to the question that you asked about other minerals. You said primarily the whole focus has been on iron ore, limestone, coal, and possibly limestone. I'll not even say bauxite. The other minerals have actually just been there. And yes, the point is valid that India has a lot of resources, various minerals, deep-seated and otherwise. And frankly speaking, we should not have one policy for all. It's not right. And I think one of the panelists did refer to some of the mineral being close to the surface, easier to mine. Some of it is deep-seated. What's happening in coal? It's one of the oldest mining mineral in India. All the underground mines have become unviable. They've either shut down or it's filled with water. It is just unviable. And that's exactly why I'm saying that one fit for all is not the right side, the right thing to do. So you need to have separate thought processes, separate policies for separate minerals. Surely, Mr. Bal did mention about these various varieties which are available in the country. Surely they are. And I tend to agree that more varieties you have, more complications you create for yourself. And they should be lesser. And what we've always seen is that we take legacy and then we bring in the new and we try to marry the two and then we continue to merge them somewhere down the line. And hopefully it will happen. But the larger point here is once we've decided to get into auctions, so we can keep deliberating, debating, saying it's not the right model, this thing, that thing. However, if I keep that aside and say, okay, now auctions are here to stay, how do we make them a success? That is the kind of thought process we should think about. I think Mr. Bal did mention with regard to MDPA. It's a classic example. Government brought in MDPA as a prerequisite in the rules itself. And then once the game started getting played, the rules started getting changed. Now, I really don't understand why. So MDPA, the first rule got changed is, or it was there in MDPA, was that the state government had the authority to revise the MDPA depending on the ground reality, depending on the situation, and so on and so forth. And suddenly one day, so many rounds of auctions happened and thereafter they removed that clause. The last auctions which were done in March 2020 thereafter, this clause goes away. That's not there. Why? Now, MDPA always asked for an annual production plan and dispatch plan, and on that basis, the government calculates the revenue, 80% of the last 2 years production dispatch and stuff like that. Now, suddenly the rules are getting up and down, saying we'll do it monthly, we'll do it quarterly. And you don't understand. So, if we have got into the auctions, simplify stuff so that more and more people get involved and it becomes easier. You know, you heard from all the panelists saying so many mines, your own presentation, so many mines got auctioned, so many got returned, so many have not been operationalized. Have we tried to look at it? Why? And the only reason is not 110% premium and 105% premium. All the ease of doing business is also one of the indicators. Now, there are realities on the ground and mining is not certainty. There's a huge thing which keeps changing. And India has this huge issue of logistics. It has issues of people, it's disturbance on the ground, where I think productivity takes a hit. You may not be able to achieve that 80%, which you have signed off for, and then you'll be penalized for that as well. So I think by and large, we need to simplify. So the ease of doing business has to be, the mantra, and the cost of doing business, where the taxation and double taxation, etc. comes in. I think if these two windows we look at very, very carefully and seriously, we can even make the options work well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary. And I see Dr. Mohan on screen. Dr. Mohan, are you there?
Yes, I thought I'd join for at least a few minutes at the end. Hi, Nick. And welcome, everyone. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join. I'm just, these days, slightly under the weather. So that's why I couldn't join in the beginning. I felt a bit better, so I came on.
Good to see you.
And please continue. Don't let me disturb you.
Oh, no, thank you. Welcome. That I was worried that you are a bit unwell. So good to see you. And I think we had some very good discussion around this topic. And with around 15 minutes still to go, if I may raise some observations that we have received on the chat box, maybe you might have seen it. But I think I might point out that one of my friends, Scott Davenport, who is Executive Director, Strategic Policy and Chief Economist, New South Wales Department of Trade and Investment, has kind of requested that his observation may be conveyed. So I am conveying it. That is, which I have already done. So it's not that we are seeking answers to that, which I did in the beginning also. He specifically said, so I'm doing it, that it is the choice of the miners to quote high. So why all this discussion about? And I'm glad that we have discussed enough on what he had pointed out in his mail to me, that he's unable to join, but it may be conveyed. So I'm conveying. Then I don't know whether panelists are able to see the questions on the chat box. In case not, then I think there is a question. Yeah. So if you would wish to take up any particular question, because there are some questions from Mr. Bhatia, Mr. Thomas, and Mr. Shrimali, how mining affected communities that we have discussed. And two questions from Mr. Desai about the auction money. And about therefore, should not government give at least in principle approval to EC and FC before auctioning? So I think probably talking about embedded clearances. So instead of reading a set of questions, if you have access to these questions, I would, because these can also be the closing remarks. These cannot, because we still have 12 minutes to go. So, and also I think before I close, I would also like to register my thanks to the organizers of this, our comms team particularly. Aditi is there and others. Ganesh Sivamani, who has been very active, working with me on these issues, and Ishita Kapoor. So there is a team who is working on these issues. So thanks to all of them. I didn't say in the beginning, I would have said at the end, but plus, please, over to you. Can we start in the reverse order with Nick, with you, if you would wish to take any of these questions?
So just one Mr. Bhatia put up about deep-seated minerals, and I think we had a bit of a talk about that already. But just one of the things, I mean, I think it has a connection with auctioning, but I think there's probably a whole discussion to be had on exploration on its own and how that should be done and how it can be encouraged. Because if you look at India, it is, apart from the Aditya Birla Bandha project now, for the last 50 years, there has not been a new discovery made in India. And that has something to do with the fact that we haven't got the exploration environment properly established to be able to get to find those deep-seated minerals, because India does have them. It has the same geology as Australia. It should not be missing out on the minerals that Australia has.
Thanks very much, Dr. Senapati. Over to you, Ms. Chaudhary. Any of the questions that you might like to pick up, because reading them all would be a long duration.
Okay. So, so Nick, what he said is right, because we do have deep-seated and many minerals which need to be explored. He didn't allude to it, but then he didn't put that many details and the pain that I think his company has also gone through during the changeover regime, I think somewhere we have lost track on the exploration. Finders keepers thought process is not a wrong thing. If someone comes and explores, fine, he or she should, or that company should get advantage of it. Obviously, the other regime of operations, taxations will apply. Why should you not go back? It used to happen that way. So I'll just leave it there, but let me run through the questions. So one of the questions is, what does the panel feel that the possible corrections is likely to happen in bid premiums in the future and from the current learning? My own sense is that, as I said, if the way things are continuing, it continues, we will continue to see these kind of bidding happening. I think we should have a calendar, as I was saying earlier. We should have a list of mines for each mineral which will get, and it's not for the state, it should be for the country, so that anyone everywhere in India can decide which one to go for. That would help to reduce and have different rules for different minerals. I think that's the call of the day, which will be important, because otherwise it's not really going to change much. One of the questions was, how do the affected communities get benefited? Now, surely the whole game is for the development of the ecosystem. It's not that someone gains and someone loses. If it's a win-lose game, it's not going to work out. It has to be a win-win. And hence, even in the earlier regime, it used to be royalties and it used to be CSR work on the ground. Now it is DMF and commitment of 2%. And it's also about employability. It's about employment. It's about development of the ecosystem and infrastructure which comes in there, whether it's on health, whether it is on education, whether it's on road infrastructure. All that has to happen in that region where you start doing mining. So I think if the communities stand to lose, no one stands to gain. So it has to be a win-win for both. And that's why I go back to your main question in the beginning, saying, is it fair to all? It has to be made fair to all.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it will be a losing game, losing battle. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Bal.
You see, there is one question by one Mr. Bhatia. His question is whether the auction mechanism for grant of concession is meeting the basic objective of enhancing the much needed mineral production in the country. I'd like to respond to this question. In fact, the mines which were auctioned, they had a EC capacity of nearly 56 million tons. In FY21, they produced only 20 million tons, and projected volume of production in FY22 is 38 million tons. So the moot point, which I had indicated and I'm reiterating now, that the auction, I mean, I understand the teething problems, but then auction has not resulted in the, increase in supply or increase in production immediately in the near term. And therefore, as against the requirement of 135 million tons of ores from Orissa, you see, it was only last year, about 93 million tons was produced in FY21, leading to a shortage in supply. And there is another question regarding the community service, which, I agree with Mr. Chaudhary, but I'd like to supplement. You see, although the companies are, supposed to pay the DMF, NMAT, and other statutory, payments for CSR and CSR related activities, but these companies, as a local area, development and as a community engagement, they are required to spend a lot of money, in their nearby vicinities. But I'm afraid with this kind of high bids, see, there is a disincentive to do so. And this is something, which is a matter of concern, because, if I earn 100 rupees and I pay 120 rupees as, revenue sharing, so where is the question of my spending money for community development, apart from the statutory levies? So that is one concern I would like to flag.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul, for being so kind of comprehensive in 3 minutes time. Over to you, Mr. Arun Kumar.
Yeah, I would, what Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary said, whether we like it or not, Chanakya Chaudhary Sabit said auctions are there to stay. Yes, auctions are there to stay, and whatever we say, this is a system which will not go away. The issue here is how to make them more practical, and in a way how to deliver larger mineral production. Now, the way auctions have till now happened is that you have reducing mineral production, which Mr. Paul had said. You have high bids, which is the part of which is the basic issue about this webinar. So this will also continue. This would also continue maybe for the next 5 to 10 years. I may be, looking at it pessimistically, but that is how it's going to be. And once this thing more or less gets established, that we are nowhere going towards enhanced mineral production, that we continue to go for very high premiums, and therefore the growth is being stymied. And then we would be perhaps looking at changes. In the whole scenario.
I think not able to hear you, Arunji.
All this, hello?
Hello, yes, now it's clear.
Yeah, because all this money goes to the states, and the states obviously will raise merry hell. For example, Orissa is supposed to get about 30,000 crores. If they get the kitty down to 20, they'll win the next election. No contest. If they get it down to 20 and they make an issue out of it, there's no contest. They will, and we are in a political economy. That will only change once the per annum production is shown to be less, and therefore the accruals are less, and it doesn't remain a 30,000 crore notional figure. The actual figure comes to around 15. Only then things are going to swing to the other side, and there would be some rationality and some loosening of our present systems would take place, which would make them more mining friendly and more market friendly. The same thing goes for base metals. You see, why the base metals and the deep-seated minerals get a short strip is because, as on date, our industrial production and our industrial structure is based on heavy metals. I don't mean heavy in the sense of base metals. I mean steel. You have some movement on chrome, you have some movement on manganese, all going to steel. And of course, cement, which takes up a whole lot of limestone, cement, iron ore, cement, of course, limestone, iron ore, bauxite. These few things in the non-coal sector account for about 80 to 85%. In fact, on this, CSEP and such think tanks should bring out papers, sensitize people that, okay, today you're getting 85% from the so-called bulk minerals, and therefore you are giving short shrift to the deep-seated mineral. But what is the possibility of those as well? And only once a proper possibility is shown, that things will improve. Because people say, oh, it's 15%, it's 10%. No, let's look at the ABCD of it. And obviously, when you look at 85%, you tend to give it a short shift. So real studies, you have zinc possibilities, you have copper possibilities in areas like Malachkhand, you have diamond possibilities, which Nick was talking about in Bandar. So if all these possibilities are collated and a case is made out that this would jump from, say, 10% or 15% to 25 or 30, that would attract regime change. And in case we just say that we have a potential, that's not going to, will be not enough pressure for a regime change for base and deep-seated minerals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have run 2 minutes over time, but I think the discussion has been worth its while, and I'm thankful to Chanakya, Nick, Ashok, and Arunji, all for being with us. And thank you, Dr. Mohan, for joining. It is encouraging to see you. I was feeling that you may not be very unwell, so thank you for joining. And thanks to our team, as I said, Aditi and others, comms team, Ganesh, Ishita. I think three things that have emerged from our last 15 minutes discussion is that we are thinking brains. So can we not think a little more on that's fine if it cannot be, but can there be alternatives to auctions, at least for the deep-seated minerals, which means that how to encourage the exploration of deep-seated minerals. We cannot obviously, it is in the act, so it is in the act. But nobody can stop thinking anyone from if there can be some alternatives. And Dr. Senapati, you have given us a good hint for our next webinar sometime on exploration. Because today's was not on exploration, but I think the real thing, as I mentioned earlier, that if we had explored well since 2010, when we stopped, probably the bids would have been lower, competitive pressures, more discoveries, more things, rather than brownfields being, just because the last date has come and so more green fields in many other, not iron ore only, but I think we are talking about the deep-seated as well. And I think the second important point that has come up is the local communities and the welfare, which has been discussed very, by all of you. And we are actually working on that, as I said. So thanks very much for being with us. And I'm especially thankful to Nick because it must be close to 9 p.m. in Brisbane. Or beyond, a little beyond.
No,
thank you very much.
And let me just, I was supposed to have welcomed you all. So let me just thank you all, at least, for having given your time to take part in this discussion. We are very keen, as Rajesh may have told you, to really have a very substantive project on mineral policy. Having been in government a long time, much earlier, I was never associated with many things, but not mining policy. And a little bit that I've learned from the work that has been done at CSEP, formerly Brookings India, in the last 1 year or so, it seems to me that this is an area which really needs a lot of work. Now, how much we succeed or don't succeed in influencing policy, one never knows, of course. But I think that this is an area in which I don't find that much research and policy research work going on. And so we are planning a substantive research program for about 18 months. And so I hope that we will keep getting your advice and participation in one way or the other, because it is a very complex area, as I've begun to realize. And we need as much discussion and advice as we possibly can get so that we can come out over a program of 18 months, some useful, both quantitative research as well as sort of practical policy suggestions. So thank you very much again.
Thanks once again, and good night.
Thank you so much.
Have a great evening, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.